Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Victory Never Sleeps. Hopefully, I will be joined tonight by Witan Erickson to talk about the amazing weekend that we had. But we will see. We will see. So, okay, so they're trying to work that out on the back end. In the meantime, GW Farnsworth, as always, you are awesome. Thank you so much. Starts off the show donating $25 to Victory Never Sleeps and $20 to the Freyshof Fund. So that's awesome. We appreciate it very much. You start off, every week with this, and we really appreciate it. Also, Gilbert donated $150 to beautify Thorshof. That is much appreciated. So thank you for that. That said, a little housekeeping on it. Where are we at with our thermo for the payoff of Freyshof? That's awesome. We are 32.4% paid off as of today. Means we have, didn't run the math, I believe we have just over 80. There we go. $84,514 that we owe remaining. So we are making awesome progress on that. We're sitting right at about $113 per member would pay it off today. You guys have been generous, and we appreciate you. And that rolls into our theme for the evening. Because of y'all's generosity and all of the great people that we have who are helping us collectively move our faith forward and establish ever more temples to our gods here in Midgard, we were able to dedicate our fifth Hof this last Saturday. That's in roughly 10 years and 3 months, going from 0 Hofs to 5 Hofs. And it is tremendous. I could not have imagined a better dedication or a more wonderful Freyshof. It was an awesome experience. Thank you to all of you who are listening, who joined us and were there this weekend. Thank you to everybody who donated that helped facilitate making that happen, to everyone who's come out and helped. The Ericksons and a crew of, a variety of different dedicated people have been out there every single weekend since we got this Hof months ago to make it ready for dedication this last Saturday. And what a tremendous, tremendous event it was. I am certain that that Freyr is pleased with the gift that we've given him. What an awesome weekend. Cliff, do you have anything you want to say starting out for folks?
Well, sure. First, I want to note that Githia Katie came down with a flu after the dedication, so she would have liked to have been here. She certainly has huge perspective to share on the Freyshof dedication conversation. So I will be speaking for her and about her as much as I can, because a lot of what everyone saw at the dedication, in particular with the place being clean and welcoming and warm, had a lot to do with her. And a lot of that is her vision for things, including the goddess shrines that were flanking the mural to Freyr. So she would have liked to have been here, and I would have liked for her to be here, because no matter how much I might try to encapsulate her point of view, it's just not the same. So I'm sure that there'll be stuff in the runestone from her, and that there will be plenty of chances for her to speak about things. But I was joking with Matt, and I've joked with a few other people about how our family has basically skipped fall. We got the keys to Freyshof, or what was going to be Freyshof, um, the 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 Church of God Assembly property on August 27th. So, when we got those keys, beaches were still open, the water park was open, the garden was in like peak productivity phase. That's when you're like getting rained on by tomatoes and peppers and all of that. Still days there was more daylight than there was dark. So, I could cut the lawn in the afternoon after work. It didn't rely on just the weekends at that point, but that was all about to be changing real quick, right there at the end of August. So, we kind of leapfrogged over all of the fall season here because we, like Allsherjargoði, Matt mentioned, we're there almost every weekend. There were only a few days where we were not personally at the Hof for both Saturday and Sunday. One of those was when we went to Gettysburg State Park in Pennsylvania for our annual feast of the Allsherjargoði, which we will be continuing. We will also, of course, have an Allsherjargoði at Freyshof, but we're going to continue going to Gettysburg every November. It just might not be on the same weekend that we did, but that's about an 8-hour drive for us one way. So we got up at like 4:30 in the morning, drove to Gettysburg, met up with everyone, did some of the sightseeing, had a bloat to the Allsherjar in the wheat field, which was a particularly bloody spot in that area, although there's plenty of those to choose from. And that place is very, very weighty. We picked that place because of the number of men of our folk who fell there fighting for their states on both sides. And then we went out to dinner, which took longer than expected. There's a whole funny anecdote about that. If you're not in the know, ask somebody who was there. And then we drove the 8 hours back to sleep like 4 hours and then go to Freyshof the next day on Sunday because we needed to get things done. So that was a particularly long weekend. It kind of just like highlights to me, we were all in. We were there all the time. It's going to feel strange not being there so much, honestly. Like 2 out of 7 days of every week, I joked with the kids that was our home away from home. Originally they were scared to like go into new rooms there or to be on one of the floors by themselves if they couldn't like physically see Katie or I. Took about a month and a half, but that changed to where they were just running around like they owned the place. So yeah, there was a lot that went into it. I don't want to steal too much away from, the rest of the conversation and questions that'll come in, but that place matters a great deal to us. And I hope that Freyr is proud. I think he is. The showing of folk there this past Saturday, I think at least partially speaks to that, but we will really know by, how bountiful or not bountiful our district, that Hof and the Asatru Folk Assembly are in the years to come. I'm cautiously confident.
So, Nick, if you throw the group picture up for us, it was tremendously well attended. I don't know how many were finally showed up. We had 146 registered. As always, some people who registered, can't make it for a variety of reasons. Usually some last minute people end up showing up, but this group picture is a very healthy picture. So many people there. And this is, probably 15 people had left by the time we remembered we should take a group picture.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the problems, and it's an awesome problem to have. By the time we realize, man, we should really get a group picture, it's always an afterthought because we're there, doing something really special. But one of the things I wanted us to, I don't know, tell people or communicate with folks that weren't there. I think a lot of people may wonder. I mean, I think it's self-explanatory what a dedication is, but I think they may wonder, what exactly that might look like and what exactly that means in an Asatru context. Um, so I suppose a couple of preliminary things. When taking possession of a new space, be it someone's home or moving into an apartment or whatever that might be, there is a process that our folk do that's, typical, that in its most generic form is called the land taking. Traditionally, that's done by a cleansing flame being brought to along the perimeter of the property. Oftentimes, if it's done in a house or an apartment, it's paraded through the rooms, and we are claiming that land or that space for the new occupants and the new the new owners or new tenants of that space, and we're making our presence and our impression felt by the spiritual inhabitants of the area. Um, Often we refer to those as the land vitir, or whatever other unseen spirits might occupy a place. And we are also inviting good spirits in. We're inviting the Aesir into a place. We're inviting our Alfar and Disir and spirits that follow us into a place. And we're staking a claim that this space belongs to us, or in the case of this Hof, that this space belongs to Freyr specifically, to the Aesir generally, and to the Asatru folk assembly. Nick, if you could throw the group outdoor picture up. Let's just give you guys a little idea. This is by no means exhaustive of the crowd, but we all gathered outside and it was nice and chilly like it's supposed to be in wintertime, which was cool. We gathered together there and we went around the edges of the property, claiming this land in the name of the Asatru Folk Assembly, in the name of the Aesir, and in the name of Yngvi Freyr. And it was a testament to how many faithful were there that we, and I told people we could kind of bunch up because it's hard to hear in the back, but it was funny that like the hailing of things made an echo because it took a while for it to get to the end of the line. And so that was cool. We went around, the corners of the property, staking claim, and then we went and we did the same thing for the building. If you could post the picture, there we go. You anticipated what I wanted. So we went around the building, sprinkling it with blessed mead and making the same claim and proclaiming that this would now be Freyshof. We also, while doing the land taking, invited, I suppose, / challenged the spirits there to bear witness to us, to know us as people, to hear our words, to witness our deeds, and, to judge our worthiness while we're in the area. That's something at any of our existent Hofs I always mention during bloat is that, those spirits have known us for a time. They've heard us and they've seen us. They're able to judge whether we live up to the things we claim to be and to the obligations that we set, and they know us. And so we invite that judgment. We don't shy away from it, and we want to be known for our deeds in this world and in the world beyond the veil. And then that culminates in us taking that mead that's been ritually charged, that we've used to bless the place, and we process with that up to the altar and present the hof as a gift to Freyr. Then, as people come up to give their allegiance to Frey, I trace a rune on each of their heads to bless them with the energy of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and mark them as people who were there that day, that were part of that once in a lifetime, very special thing. For this instance, I traced the Rhytho rune on there. For anyone who might not know, our first 24 hofs will each bear a corresponding rune to that order in the Elder Futhark. And Rhytho happens to be the rune of Freyshof. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that went. I thought that everybody took, as a Gothi, you always want to make sure that the people who are there are experiencing the level of awe and of piety that you want to convey. And I thought everyone there was absolutely in a pious place and was feeling the magnitude of the event. Cliff, what was your impression of, how the folk received that particular ceremony and Saturday as a whole?
There's Katie peeking in behind me. She retrieved my phone from the kids' martial arts studio.
I give you.
Hi.
Oh, you hear? You hear? She's not doing too good. She's got that scratchy throat.
Jump on it. I thought for sure you were going to be facing the camera a different direction. So
Nope.
my sneaking didn't work.
Did not work at all. Everyone saw you from the first peek.
Yeah.
Not stealthy.
Bye.
Bye, Katie.
So, the impression that I got from the folk, both just, from observation and things that they came and straight up told me, was really a sense of awe. I think that, first, we're blessed with a really beautiful building there. So we had a really good canvas to work with. The wood paneling in the interior is just amazing. The outside, even though it's basically just a long brick building, the columns on the front and the overhang of the roof there at the porch area really add a lot of character to it. And we intend on improving on that, of course. We'll talk about that in another episode, though. We're talking about dedication. There was really a sense of awe. People were blown away at, first, the size of the place. It really is large. And when you step into that sanctuary, into the Vey, it is striking just how large and imposing it is. And I like that. I like that it communicates this sense that Freyr is greater than us. I like the imposing nature of the building. I know in Asatru, in heathenry, there's sometimes a pushback against that it's we're kin to the gods, right? So sometimes I think people misinterpret that to mean that we could be casual with the gods, and that's not at all. That's not it at all. It's more like being in your great grandpa's dad office or something like that. It's like, okay, all the really old cool stuff is in here, and if I break something, I'm done for. That's a kin relationship as well. And I think that some of that's the scale of the building. I think some of that is sort of the intentional way that we arranged things there. I think that the lighting in particular really lent itself to that. The number of candles that were burning in there, and that combined with the wood paneling and the earth tones that were in there, and the light curtains that Katie had chosen, and the forest green tablecloths that were on the central folk fire, and the 4 corner tables for the sanctuary sitting area, and all of that, I think really it worked well. And everything in that building is designed to draw your eyes upward, from the columns before you even enter the building to the pitch of the roof. When you go through the first set of doors, you're met by a large, wide staircase that goes up to the double doors into the sanctuary. When you pass through those doors, you have 4 rows of arches on either side of you, and just that go into the recessed dais, which is all pointed upwards. And then we added to that by intentionally putting a hero and ancestor shrine on either side at a lower stature, and then the goddess shrines to the right and left of Freyr with a slightly greater stature, and then Freyr in the middle with the greatest stature, of course, so that everything is pointed up towards Freyr and his halo. It's not the middle of the room, but everything, like, that's the middle of your view when you go in there, because your eyes are drawn upward. And yeah, I think people were awestruck. I don't know if they thought all of that stuff, but that's sort of what we were doing. There was very much an intentional design there of, the hero and the ancestors being lesser than the goddesses. And in this temple, at least, the goddesses that are honored there being lesser than Freyr. That might be different in different settings, but in that temple, that is certainly the case. That is Freyr's home. That is his home in Midgard. So everyone else there is somewhat secondary.
So that people know, you mentioned that there are 2 goddess shrines.
Yes.
Who are those, Asatru, and why?
So we have seated to Freyr's right the Lady Freya, and to his left we have his wife Gerther. And the reason we chose them, I think, is fairly obvious. Freya is his sister, and she is seated in the place of honor at his right because of her power, her standing amongst the Aesir, and seated to his left is his wife in the second greatest place of honor. So when you walk in, Gerther is to your right and Freya is to your left, but they're to the Lord's right and left, respectively, in the traditional places of honor. And then we did the same for the hero shrine and the ancestor shrine. The named hero is on the right side in the place of honor as an ancestor of particular importance, and then the ancestors as a whole are to the left, all represented, but not all of equal standing.
And so, as a note for people that might not be as familiar with our lore, Freya and Freyr are mentioned. They're very often paired in description in the lore. They're very often mentioned, in the same paragraph, occupying a lot of the same space. Their position as brother and sister isn't. So the gods, the way that our cosmology is presented, is that All-Father Odin is the All-Father, meaning the father of all the gods. But in a very specific and particular, like in that sense, Thor and Heimdallr are brothers, but they're not mentioned as a pair ever, to my understanding. They happen to be related, but there's not that parity. Freyr's name means Lord, and Freya's name, respectively, means lady. And they're paired, and they're often throughout our lore mentioned as a pair. So her having a special place of prominence in his hof is a very nice touch there. And
I don't know if it,
yeah.
Go ahead. I don't know if it mentions it specifically in the lore or not. It may, but I know that it personally, and I think this is just generally true in tradition, that they're often thought of as twins as well.
Yeah, I don't believe it's mentioned explicitly, but that's an implication. That's an impression that's, well propagated, I guess.
Yeah, they're simply the male and feminine of the same name. They're very much mirrors of each other in that way.
So you mentioned a special Hof hero. Can you share with people who that is? And Nick, can you throw up the picture of that shrine?
Yes, it's Svenbjorn Beatonson, the first Allsherjargoði of the Asatru Fellowship. I'm not going to attempt to say it because that I will butcher worse than I butchered the poor man's name. But I sent an article into the Runestone about it, which everyone can read soon, about why we chose him. But the basic reasons are that I wanted to choose a modern Asatru hero. I think it's really important for our folk and for the Freyshof culture that I'd like to develop there. It's had 3 kind of proto months to take root in the work days and stuff there. But what I want us to focus on the fact that modern heroes of Asatru are not only possible, but really important to everything we're doing. And Allsherjargoði Svenbjorn's persistence and really, I would say, zealotry helped to bring Asatru back as a living religion in Iceland and beyond, but initially in Iceland. Also, it's sort of a cautionary representation as well, that without this is not to his fault. This is to the fault of his successors and to the people that took over from him. But that if we're not really careful about how we instruct new Asatru that come to the Asatru Folk Assembly, and if we're not really careful about how we instruct our children and cultivate that next generation of Asatru, that our work and our victory is not ensured in any way. Like, it is always at risk. And the Asatru Fellowship in Iceland, I think, is a good example of that. It started off with piety and with true belief and with a recognition for the same ethics that we hold, I believe. But that wasn't maintained by Allsherjargoði Svenbjorn's successors, and so it's deteriorated, to say the least. So it's something we need to constantly work on, and we need to, I mentioned this in the article. Personally, I hope that Svenbjorn in afterlife, that his spirit sees the Asatru Folk Assembly as the legitimate successor to what he was doing there, because sadly the Asatru Fellowship isn't worthy of that. So that's why we chose him. And hopefully we can develop more of a cult around all of that as time goes on. It's kind of basic right now. The photo of him, Nick, can you put that shrine photo back up again? The photo of him there is actually an album where he is chanting Voluspa and I believe Havamal. And it's pretty cool. We're going to utilize that at different times. The record is in the record sleeve there, right up there in the shrine. So, and we do have one of those sort of modern little Victrola boxes that has the speakers built into it. So we can play that. I didn't get to do it at dedication. It slipped my mind. I wanted to work that in somehow, but you'll just have to come to Yuletide if you want to hear that.
That's one of the things. Every time we go away from one of these events, there's something we meant to do that we didn't. Or we're like, man, should have done this or should have done that. And none of that is absent-mindedness, honestly, it's the opposite of absent-mindedness. It's that we're so present in the awe of the moment that sometimes, little detail things slip because we're all awestruck. It's one of the beautiful things about it. We had, I would say, well over 120 people there this weekend. When each of them was processing up to personally, give their allegiance to Lord Freyr, and I was tracing a rune on each of their heads, looking out and looking at them as they came up, that takes a certain amount of time to process all those people up and not to make anyone feel rushed and have everyone have their moment in front of Freyr's altar for the first time. But seeing just that look of awe and of gravitas on everyone's face as they came up was a very, very special thing, and something that I'm really proud happened like that. There's a lot more to say about it, but before I do, Caleb donated $60 to help pay off Freyshof. So thank you, Caleb. We appreciate that very much. And judging by it being spelled with the K, I assume this is the same gentleman who gave me a ride to and from the airport. So I appreciate that too. Thank you. And Steve bought us 10 coffees. That's a $50 donation. So thank you for that, Steve. So it's worth, I don't know, worth taking a moment to note. Cliff mentioned a little bit about Sveinbjorn and his veneration there. Couple of things. First, he mentioned that it wasn't maintained well with folks that came after him in the organization that he founded. Allsherjargoði started out as a, noble and good Asatru organization that was foundational in bringing back the worship of our gods. And that was maintained by Sveinbjorn's immediate successor, Allsherjargoði, Jormundur Ingi Hansen. But due to some of the rot and things that take place in a lot of, unfortunately, early stage groups to reintroduce Asatru, that wasn't maintained. And through voting and committee and whatever else, the spirituality left that organization and was replaced by leftist woke politics and such, which is very sad. And so, some of you may note that some of our modern heroes aren't or weren't part of the Asatru Folk Assembly. We have heroes. Elsie she had her own group called the Odinist Fellowship. The two founders of the Odinic Rite, Stubba and Hoskold, John Ewell and John Gibbs Bailey. Well, I reversed the order when I gave you their real names, but yeah. Founded the Odinic Rite and Sveinbjorn with the Allsherjargoði. And one of the reasons for that is something, and I was talking to some folks last week about it and someone at Dedication about it a little bit. There was a time during the reawakening of our faith where the Allfather awoke, he awakened the soul in several people, and he, gave them the charge to do this, to make this happen. And it was wise to disperse at that time to see what was going to make it, see what seeds planted were going to take root. And so there was a number of people that, gave it their best effort. There was a time there of proving to see what way of doing this worked, to see what was going to stand the test of time and carry the mantle of Asatru into the future. And, over time, as we mentioned in the 90s, the Allsherjargoði fell to degeneration and the forces of chaos. And so we want to, take the good of that and be good stewards of the accomplishments and the heroes that set that forth. The Odinic Rite was doing great things, and then they weren't. That organization has fallen and dispersed, and the good thing that Stub and Hoskold founded has gone to nothing. So we wanted to be good stewards of that tradition and of those heroes as we move this forward. Elsie's Odinist Fellowship didn't last past her lifetime, but we wanted to again take that legacy and add it to the collective legacy of Asatru as we move forward. And so it's very important that we do that with our modern heroes. I should also mention Alexander Rudd Mills and what he put in motion due to various events and things in his lifetime. Despite his best efforts, it didn't outlive him. But we want to harness that legacy and preserve it and cherish it and move it forward under our tent. And that's part of our responsibility as those that, were the ones that were the last men standing in that struggle to see what this would look like going forward. And that's the legacy that we move forward and that we carry on and that we safeguard as we continue to grow and to evolve the Asatru Folk Assembly as the church of the Aesir in Midgard, who won that time of struggle and the time of testing. So something else that was a special feature of the dedication. I should do this first. You guys may have noticed the amazing mural of Yngvi Freyr in his hof. And Nick, if you could put that up again, it's worth oohing and ahhing over. It is magnificent. Witan Svan gets better each time in his, holy depictions of the Aesir. And it's funny because I got to see all of this as, in little bits and pieces and starts and stops as he was doing it. That's one of my special privileges I get as the Allsherjargoði. But I don't have the words to express how profoundly moving and breathtakingly magnificent it is in real life, to stand there before it, to see it, and to be in the presence of Freyr as he's, channeled through this amazing mural. And, we're trying to show you a picture. It's cool, but it's not anywhere near the magnitude of what you feel when you're there. It's truly magnificent, and I encourage everybody to, get a chance to go see it. And that's the special thing, is now that it's our hof, it's not going anywhere. Cliff, do you have anything to say about the mural or how that came about?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a photo to Nick here because I want people to see what it looked like before Joe Drodas set to work on things. Because that space where Freyr is used to just be a hole in the wall, a large 9x7 hole in the wall. And without Joe's efforts, we wouldn't have a canvas for Witan Svan to have put that on. And I think it's really important for people to get to see just what work was put into that. I think I might have found 2 pictures that are going to really kind of represent that I'm getting to Nick right now. And and then it'll probably take Nick a minute to process that. So bear with me just a minute. Hoping to beat you to the question. Not quite. All right, so Nick, I just sent you 2 photos. One is me next to the untouched hole in the wall, and the next one is Joe up on the scaffolding doing the work. So when you get them and when you can if you could put them up. But 2 people I want to mention. I mentioned, there we go. So there is me in a victory shirt with all the stuff littered around. That is where the Frey mural went, and it's a lot less impressive that way. There's a utility storage hall behind there. It gives you a little bit of, the reason I took that photo was just to communicate the scale to Allsherjargoði Matt and to the Witan about what needed to happen to get that mural ready. And there's Joe up there on the scaffolding doing his thing. So he framed that out, and with the help of a couple of members, Mike and Adam, got the drywall up there. But Joe did the lion's share of all of that. He planned it. He cut the 2x4s to the proper lengths. He framed it entirely, and he put all the drywall up and finished all of it. He had a couple of people there to help with handing up the full sheets of drywall. And Joe Drodos is our hofs steward, and without him, this place wouldn't have been ready. So first, thank you very much, Joe. You are absolutely instrumental to the operation of Freyshof, and I want you to get your credit, because Joe did work that I'm just not qualified to do. I have helped patch drywall before. That's not the same thing as framing a wall and putting it up. And I know a lot of people have the ability to do that, but Joe was the man in the place who had the skills when and where we needed them, and it's greatly appreciated. Also, Allsherjargoði Matt mentioned Caleb Harlock a little bit ago. Caleb has put tons and tons of time into getting Freyshof ready, and has traveled great distances to do it. He lives about 4.5 hours away, but almost every Saturday workday, Caleb was there, and sometimes he stayed over. Stayed one night at my house, getting very little sleep because that night the dogs decided to be up all night howling and barking at some leaf out in the field. He camped there one night and helped confirm that our friendly neighbor was actually working on the place, because that neighbor accosted Caleb to make sure he was supposed to be there. And he texted me to make sure that Caleb was supposed to be there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Funny enough, Caleb had a key to the building and didn't think to demonstrate his ability to open the door. And if he had thought of it at the time, Caleb actually held title to the property. So he could have shown that
this is my building
property. Yeah. So of all the people to be accosted about that, it's funny that it was Caleb. But I appreciate it that that the guy across the street, Kip, is watching the place for us in a friendly way. He saw something funny going on, wanted to make sure it wasn't some meth head tent. So everything was fine, though. Everything's been fine. There have been no meth head tents, just the Caleb tent. So that's good. But Caleb has put a lot of work in. Caleb is kind of a jack of all trades. He's a smart young man, and he can figure most things out, even if he hasn't done it before. So Caleb has been a big help on all sorts of small and medium-sized things that needed to get done, especially in the cleaning. That's one of the worst jobs that we had there. Hopefully nobody who visited on Saturday was able to tell, but that place smelled like mold and dead bugs and old lady teeth when we first got it. So it didn't smell like that anymore. There was a lot of mopping, a lot of scrubbing. We scrubbed and mopped all the walls downstairs, scrubbed and mopped the floors twice. Every single chair that everyone sat on was scrubbed and steamed with one of those hand whistles. and the water was gross. I think Katie has a picture of that. I wish she was here because she could share us the nasty water picture just so y'all could get an idea of what we were dealing with. But it basically looked like used motor oil. So not good stuff. Didn't want it getting on your nice clothes. Didn't want that fumigation that would happen out of it. Some things were moldy. So if you sat down on them, there'd be like a little puff. And then we all go home sick at the end of the day. So the cleaning was really a huge job, and everyone who came there really helped out. But Joe and Caleb were the top two volunteers, and I would be remiss if I didn't also mention Josh Wilson, who helped us get the first floor heater exhaust motor replaced and working. It seemed like kind of an afterthought project when we were there in September. It became more and more apparent how important that was as the weeks went on. So, I think it may have been pretty warm there over the weekend because we had more bodies in there than we were used to. But it's important for the opera. We need to make sure the pipes don't burst when we're not there. So I always turn the water off every time we leave to make sure that if something happens, it's contained. A dozen gallons is better than thousands of gallons by a long stretch, but also making sure that, especially that first level, the basement level, that's heated to 55 degrees when there's no people there to give us some buffer room just in case the thermostat's not working right, is important. We don't need to come back to any disasters. We've already cleaned it once. We'd like to the deep clean, of course, it'll get cleaned regularly, but we don't want to have to revisit that anytime soon. So yeah, a lot of people put work in, but myself, Katie, Joe, Caleb, and Josh are the ones who did most of it. We had a lot of other people who helped out, and all of that's appreciated. Some people that could show up for one work day, some people that could show up for 2 or 3. But Joe and Caleb and Josh have been there almost as much as Katie and I, at least once a week between the 3 of them, I think.
That's much appreciated. You guys have done an amazing job with it. A little bit on the building. So this was a building that I'd had my eye on for a long time as a possibility. And it is an amazing building and property and location, and so many things about it are just so very optimal. One of the kind of comments that I was seeing over in the chat was that people felt like the building didn't look as big on the outside as it felt on the inside. I mean, I think the whole thing is big, but do you have any concept of the square footage?
Yeah, it's about 3,600 square feet. I think that's per floor. There's actually like a floor plan on the Austintown Township zoning page. Mm-hmm. But it's I think 3,650 or 3,640 something. I think part of what makes it seem so massive is that the second floor, the basement level, has the same footprint as the entire building. So it doesn't look, you don't quite realize that it's 2 usable stories there when you go into it. And because most of the community hall is in the basement, that still allows for the first floor, not the basement floor, to have that vaulted ceiling going on, and just have a massive amount of airspace in it, which we will pay for when the heating bills are due. But I'll try to be as responsible as I can with that without it destroying the building. But I do think it's going to be, we'll need donations to keep the place properly heated. It's not going to be our least expensive one for the utilities, I don't think. So, but it's 36 something square feet, and it shows. It's large, and there's the 2 classrooms downstairs. One of them we have finished into a kid's playroom. The second larger one is still just basically an overflow storage room, but will be library slash study slash lounge for the grown-ups, where, you know, of course, we'll put a bookshelf and as many books as we can get our hands on. I want to put a proper desk or several desks for people to do real study and note taking for scholarly and, you know, devotional learning type activities. But also with, you know, a few comfortable Archie Bunker kind of chairs or love seater, something like that, so people can relax in there. And it'll be the one room where, you know, where the kids won't be allowed to go without a grown up. It's going to be, you know, the kids can go into the kids room to get away from the grown-ups, and the grown-ups can go into the grown-ups room to get away from them. And yes, Nick, you're right. I mentioned it in person, but I want to literally have the library desk lamps with the green lampshade and the pull chain. I want it to look the part. You know, I think that aesthetics matter. You know, I literally think people will study more seriously with that lamp in there. And if not, it looks cool, and that's good enough for me.
There you go. Something else just worth noting. It was very special to have our founder, Steve McNallen, and his wife, Githia Sheila McNallen, there for the dedication. And they both seemed very, very pleased with it. And that meant a lot, I think, to all of us. It was great to have them out there. I know a lot of our members, this was the first time maybe they've been able to meet them in person and speak with them, which is great. And, you know, those of us who've interacted with them, you know, it was great to interact with them again. Currently where I'm out here, I interact with them, you know, once a month or so, but it was great to have them out there to be part of it. And it was, you know, even greater that they were proud and pleased with what we were doing.
Yeah, I think in the Northeast area, especially, Steve and Sheila hadn't been able to make it out to a Winter Nights for, I think, 5 years. I think the last one they were at was Camp Natimus. So it's been some time. And, you know, I know they've been to Thorshof and to Njordshof, but a lot of the folk up here haven't been able to get down to those. So I know for a fact this was the first meeting of our founder and of Githia McNallen for a lot of the folk here. And it's greatly appreciated and was, you know, really cool. And I hope life-changing for a lot of them. I think one of the things about founder McNallen that struck me when I got to know him personally, and that I know it always comes up every time I talk to someone who's just met him for the first time, is how, like, he's this modern living Asatru hero, right? And when you meet him, it can be intimidating, and there's this, you know, idea of who Stephen McNallen is that's built up in our heads. And then when you speak to him and realize that he is, and I mean this with love and not disrespect, but that he is just a man, that he has a sense of humor, that, you know, that he's fun to be around. I think that's not that anyone thinks that he wouldn't be. I just think that experience is something that isn't necessarily what people were expecting. You know, they're expecting to be meeting this holy figure. And I don't think that people often anticipate that it's going to be, you know, quite so chummy. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's nice for people to get a sense of the man and not just the myth. Get a sense of, you know, his personality, his sense of humor. He's always been, you know, a very charismatic guy, and getting to speak to him or to ask him questions or get insight into, you know, who he is, or why things are the way they are, or why things came to be the way they've come to be, is, I think, a really special opportunity. So we could relive a bunch of stuff about it over and over again, because it really was a very, very special, very beautiful experience. But I wanted to get to some questions that we have, and then hopefully, maybe share a little bit more or get, some more questions if they get generated on it. Our audio visual guys have put together or are putting together something cool, and I'm looking forward to when that comes out. They drove all the way across the country from Montana, and they are still not home due to the the storms and things across the plains. So they made an epic journey out there and are still on the way home from said journey. We have so to start on a light and frivolous note. What is the meaning of life according to your religion? So asking the lightweight questions first. Cliff, do you want to take a stab at what is the meaning of life?
That life is good. Life is now, life is good, and we shouldn't hesitate to live it. We don't like planning is good, but living to plan is not good. Being prepared is good, but don't miss the moment. You want to make sure that you seize opportunity, that you savor the moment, and that the things that are beautiful in life, the things that are pleasurable in life, the things that are satisfying in life, those shouldn't be rejected. It doesn't do you any good to starve yourself of the things that make you feel alive. It's sort of like what we were talking about with the group photo, right? So the best thing for the group photo would have been for me to have a slot on the schedule for the group photo, or to interrupt everyone's moment right after the dedication, right? And to basically ruin that moment and get everybody together for the group photo when we had the most people there. But it would have ruined the moment. It would have been the Japanese tourist thing to do. So not that I thought of it and bypassed it for any intentional reason. I was in that kind of awestruck moment myself, but life is to be lived. Life is for the living. So the meaning of life is to be good, but to recognize that good is beautiful, and to really embrace the fact that our blood is pumping, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I think the meaning of life is in Asatru.
Yeah, it's definitely a question worth asking. It's one of those big questions of existence. And I think that, each religion in the world answers it in a different way. And I think there's the slogan answer, and then I think there's kind of the meat and taters, important answer. So, Islam might say the meaning of life is submission to Allah, because that's what Islam means. But I think if you asked a devout Muslim, his answer would probably be deeper. A Christian might say faith in Christ or something. It'd be easy to say that the meaning of life is loyalty to the Aesir, because again, that's what Allsherjargoði means. I think it is that, but I think it's a little bit deeper of an answer, and I think it couples with Cliff's answer. Life is about building fame and reputation and, the art of living a good life worthy of recognition by the Aesir and by your descendants. I think one of the most fundamentals for any heroic man in the course of human existence is that quest for immortality through deed, through action, through accomplishment. I think you only see with the advent of Abrahamism that morphed into something other than that. As a matter of fact, they have to specifically admonish against that, because that's the natural condition, is to want to be great, to want to do great things and accomplish things that are worthy of remembrance and of recognition of the gods. And I think that's very much encapsulates the Asatru meaning of life. It's to seek greatness and worth in the eyes of your family and the Aesir. And that's done by embracing life and using your existence here in Midgard as your proving ground for who you are and what you can do worth remembrance and celebration. And sometimes for many people that can be writ larger or smaller, but that concept is important. And that means seizing the time you have and the opportunities you have to do things, to accomplish, to find victory. And that's the simple answer. I think we could talk about the particulars of life's meaning for forever.
And not to be afraid is a really big thing. Sometimes the Christians or others will say that Asatru is fatalistic because of not being afraid to die, but it's not that. It's just being unafraid to live. And sometimes there's a certain element of risk there, but it's not the death that's the focus of that. It's the reputation, like Allsherjargoði Matt said. You do what you're going to do full-throated, and what happens happens.
Absolutely, and that's much easier said than done. Also, ooh and ah over this horn. This is the special horn that Githia Katie carved as a special commemorative Freyshof dedication celebration horn. Beautiful carvings on it, painted with the unique and I think really pretty Freyshof colors. Next up, this is a good time to.
I was going to say they're gorgeous colors until you go to use them with graphic design.
Oh, they're still pretty. They just become a challenge. But I appreciate that our graphic design team is up to the challenge.
They are.
So, and we will see, Witan Erickson, if you are up to the merchandising challenge that comes with it, because that could be a little bit trickier. Where was I going? Oh, I was going to say this is a good time to mention both of these questions were emailed to us. It's a question and answer driven program in large part. If you have questions that you want answered, you can send them to us at any time at vns@runestone.org. And we'd be happy to get to them the very next program that we get to. So, as I said, next question, how do you rectify other people's having other origin myths? Someone has to be right. Cliff, would you like to take the first stab at this?
Sure. So I don't really rectify it at all. I don't discount the origin myths of other ethnic religions. It's just not important to me. That doesn't mean that they're wrong and that I'm right, or that they're right and I'm wrong. I know, and I'm only really interested in where my people came from. In terms of other pantheons of little g gods or other entities out there, I don't discount their existence. The Aesir and the Vanir are two families of gods that join together. And there is an entire Utgard out there that they know exists. It's not really important what's out there. That's the other. But I don't feel like I need to justify Asatru cosmology to someone of any other faith. And nor do I expect them to justify their cosmology to me. different peoples all come from different contexts and understandings of the world. So in Asatru, you see a lot of references to mountains and ice and forests and things that our ancestors were familiar with because that's how they understood the world. And they're describing a truth in the terms that they know how to use. Other peoples have different origins and are made of the stuff of where they come from and the materials that their gods had to work with, I suppose.
Yeah, I think we get first, I appreciate the question, and I understand the logical like struggle or impetus to try to make stuff all match up, because I think, I mean, that makes sense because we have a certain amount of shared existence with other, with all the other creatures that occupy the earth with us. And I guess, in that sense, the universe. But that's not the point of the lore. And I think we also get a little bit confused naturally because our point of reference are books by the Abrahamists that are at, at the price of death, you accept are the literal writings of their God. That's not the way that myth is in the rest of human existence. That's a particular Abrahamic understanding of their particular mythos. So we're not telling you that, in the beginning there was a big giant and then the giant got chopped up into pieces, and like when I'm on the plane, I'm literally like, woo, I'm flying through Amir's brains. And I don't mean to make light of the question, but we often don't think logically to that next step. Our ancestors had brains as large as us too. They built homes out of wood and ships out of wood. They didn't literally think that the timber of their ship was somehow a hair from a giant. They weren't stupid people. These are poetic ways of expressing truth. And the truth wasn't meant objectively in the term of science. It was meant subjectively in the term of our creation, our race, our gods, our existence. So it wasn't a scientific textbook, but truths are told in our origin story that are essential to how creation came about and how we came about as a race, as a unique biological order of existence in Midgard. You don't have to believe in like the giant worlds of Muspelheim and Niflheim. You need to understand that there was cold and there was heat. There was a primal polarity of opposites, and through their intermixing, a quickening happened, and order and consciousness emerged in a long process. There were primal forces that were immensely powerful, that were without will and consciousness and order. From that came beings of order and of consciousness that shaped the chaos of early existence and brought that chaos into order. Those are our Aesir. Those same forces of order that found a chaotic and wild primordial existence made it beautiful and ordered and structured with laws of nature and how things work and a system and a functioning that worked. They then found existent things exemplified by the logs, the driftwood that were Asker and Embla, and they imbued those things with the gifts of sentience and of soul and of life and vigor, and they made those things us. And over the course and the expanse of time, the gods taught us lessons and helped us go from something very primal and brutish to something noble, to kings, to the amazing race that our folk are, that conquered the world, that brought order to the far reaches of Midgard, that built civilization. And they did that through their instruction and their being with us. Heimdallr brought the knowledge of things to our people to ennoble them, and progressively through the generations to make them the amazing Aryan race that we're all part of. Those things are true, and they're taught by our origin lore and our understanding of creation myth. I don't pretend to be an expert on other groups of people's creation myths. I'm sure many of them have truths that are relevant and important to those folks, and I'm sure some of them are silly and not, and I'm sure there's probably a lot in between. But that's how I reconcile those things. I don't think they're fighting for a scientific truth. I don't think that's the way that other faiths do things. I think it is particularly the way that the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims do things. So I do think they have to reconcile those truths.
Did you know that African and Asian elephants honor their dead? When they're migrating, they will recognize ancestral bones, and they have like a specific kind of ritual that they do. They approach these bones silently and like kind of caress them with their trunks and legs and smell them and turn them over and sort of like will scatter them gently, and they will actually recognize the matriarchs in their families greater than other deceased elephants that they recognize. So there's a recognition of lineage and ancestry there, and I would go so far as to say that they're doing something spiritual when they do that. Whether it's religion or not, it's hard to say. But the reason I mention it is because what those elephants are doing is real. Like it's primally real. It's not contaminated by anyone trying to teach them anything from the outside. And I don't need to justify Asatru to those elephants, and they don't need to justify their ancestors' bones to me. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like what they're doing is real, and what I'm doing is real, and that doesn't present a conflict in and of itself.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, and it certainly doesn't have to. And it's not something that I ever see attested to, or that didn't seem to be such a conflict in world literature, except for when we read writings of Christians interacting with other groups of people. You don't see that in ancient literature that's pre-Christian about, you don't typically see that, certainly between other races of people, like having that existential struggle, like I have to be right or you can be right. No, we can be us and you can be you, and that's fine. Both of those things can be right for us individually, because it wasn't a battle of scientific truth. It was a battle of moral truths of who we are and who they are. And those doesn't have to be that overlap. It's not a astrophysics debate. That's not like, we can learn scientific truths from some of the lore, but that's not the focus of it or the purpose behind it.
Yeah, I think you see a little bit of that in in Old Testament Judaism, where the Israelites are specifically against other gods that they recognize as real, but they simply want to destroy the worship of.
Mhm.
And sometimes the people that are worshiping them as well. And, to be completely balanced about it, tribal genocide was certainly germane to warfare in the Bronze Age. That's how it worked. And then I guess in the Roman Empire, you see that, but it's more of a political tool. The subservience of a pantheon of conquered people to the Roman pantheon is not so much a spiritual truth for them, but like a political recognition of conquered and conqueror. That because we conquered you, our gods must be greater, and so you owe Jupiter the proper due.
Yeah, but it's still, even in that form, and even in Old Testament Judaism, it doesn't pretend these other gods don't exist and don't have power and don't do stuff. It's saying my gods are better than your gods, not my gods are the gods and your gods don't exist. You're silly. It's no, I'm marching under the banner of my gods. You're marching under the banner of your gods. I win, therefore my gods are better or are stronger. Clearly, they've they've given me victory over the might of your gods. But inherently in that, it acknowledges your gods exist and they have powers, and those powers were not as as mighty as the powers of Mars. And that makes sense. That's a much more authentic to humanity's existence position than there are no such thing as the only God is Jehovah. That's not it's a very, very recent understanding of that concept by a very select group of people. I was on the wrong thing over here because something came up in the chat. Oh, just as a reflection on the chat, Primal Mike Kindred says, for years I considered myself a traditionalist and wanted my practices to be ancestrally authentic. The more I watch VNS, the more I realize authentic meant piety to me. I prefer piety now. I hope that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think it's where many of us start. And I don't think it's a wrong place to start. Steve, so our founder, Steve McNowan, we had a little history presentation that we're very blessed that he was there for. And, in the early days when he was founding the Viking Brotherhood, which for folks that don't know is the predecessor organization, one of the predecessor incarnations of the Asatru Folk Assembly. And he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what this is supposed to look like. As we were talking about, there was this group of men and women that were given this dump of inspiration by the gods of there is not this thing that is the worship of the Aesir in Midgard. There needs to be. The people are waking up, bring them home. What do you do with that? What does that look like? And it takes a lot of different forms. And I think that a kind of a starting point is, okay, well, let's make it look exactly like it did when it stopped being a thing. What did this look? Where did we leave off with this? Let's go back to there as our starting point. And there is a logic to that makes a lot of sense. And I don't fault that. I think we were all there. I know I was there for a time. And that's what, people will chastise that phase as Viking LARP. But trying to emulate the last people you knew who did something right isn't something to be scoffed at. But not evolving it from that point kind of is. So a lot of us start there and you want to be authentic, and authentic a lot means recreating something that other people did exactly the way they did it as best we can. But then you think like, well, what made what they were doing authentic? It wasn't because they were emulating somebody who'd come before them. It was because they were being themselves in the most authentic and true way of being, 9th century Vikings. They weren't pretending they were cavemen or Bronze Age, Celts or whatever, or funnel beaker people. They were being themselves in the time that they lived and worshiping their gods with the piety they had, with the material culture and social culture that they had at the time. And so, I rebuff any accusation that the Allsherjar Folk Assembly is not authentically Asatru. No, we are absolutely authentic, because we don't have any pretense that we are something we're not, or that we live in a time that we don't. Our gods are eternal. They've been with us since the beginning, and they will be with our descendants until the end of time, until the end of, existence and beyond. So our faith should reflect who we are, and should develop and grow and evolve and be relevant to the people that live whenever that might be. And I just thought that was a cool comment there. Yeah, please, Cliff.
So I think also, you mentioned how our ancestors didn't like LARP cavemen, right? The Vikings were Iron Age people who did Iron Age things. And, looking at them as the last frame of reference is good. Also, looking at things that came before them can help inform our religion, and recognizing that what they were doing in that last, century of, of first generation Asatru, we'll call it for lack of a better term, one big long continuous unbroken religion that evolved slowly over time, but that did evolve. There were changes. Probably every single generation, something small changed, through a retelling of a story, or the way that a Gothi maintained his hof, or something like that. But then we have this 1,000+ year gap where to recognize tradition, we can't just ignore that 1,000 years happened. Like, that's part of our folks' tradition as well. That Christian era, it matters, and there are people who mattered in that time. And the whole history of modern Europe and of medieval Europe, that's all still Asatru. Like, the people there might not have been Asatru in the sense that we mean it, but they're part of our connection back to the gods. They're part of that unbroken, chain of life that goes back to Asker and Embla, and that really gives us that kinship bond with the Aesir. So even when people didn't know the names of the gods, when the folk had forgotten the gods, the folk still existed. And so our experiences, traumatic or otherwise, during that time are also relevant to inform our modern practice. Sometimes we talk about, Gothic architecture and cathedrals, right? And how those are not expressions of Semitic religion. Those are expressions of European religiosity. And they have the wrong iconography on them because of what the folk who crafted them were taught, what they knew. But that spirituality that's there in a Gothic cathedral, just as one example, is very European. Those are temples that our folk built, and they were misled on who to build them to, but that stuff matters, and I think it's right to incorporate that stuff into our modern practice, and that it would be traditional not to, because you can't just skip 25 generations and pretend like it never happened.
Absolutely. And that's part of the process of our faith maturing over time. And that's proper. Again, it's easy to get on the bandwagon and to criticize, but I get the earlier missteps or, confusion or places. We all start from a different spot. And I think we should have a certain amount of grace and understanding that we grant some folks of, everybody starts somewhere. And I think a lot of us who've done this for a long time recognize similar things that assumptions that we may have started with, that we've learned, we've learned how it really is or how it ought to be over time and over experience. And there's some people that, haven't had the opportunity to have that yet. And I welcome and invite those people to come and, experience Asatru with us and grow with us.
I still have my tunic up in my closet upstairs. I did this dreadful thing for a while, a tunic and a tie, I called it, trying to fuse the two things. Didn't really work too well, but I gave it a go.
There's some cool tunics. I'm not anti tunic. It's funny because dressing like a Viking doesn't mean dressing like a priest. And I think sometimes that's odd. I think some kind of Viking age inspired liturgical garment isn't inappropriate at all. As a matter of fact, there's a number of really cool ones. Steve had a really, really cool one that's in the slideshow that I like a lot, and I wouldn't find that off-putting at all in a religious context for a Gothi or an Allsherjargoði to wear. And Jormundre Ingi, he had a really nice one that I wish I had a picture of on hand. He was very excited. He designed the clerical outfit that their Gothar wear. But he had a real special one made for him that was cool looking. And I'd like to go ahead and find the picture of that. I think Chris Savage has that picture somewhere, but I thought that was really cool too. So yeah, there's a little different there.
He also, at the same time, though, dressed really snazzy.
Yeah.
There's pictures of him as like a clothing model.
Yeah, he was known he is known for being a sharp dressed gentleman. He is still this side of the veil, but he's a very old man, and largely lives a less public life than he once lived. But yeah, absolutely. So the next question is an interesting one, and it led to a couple side questions earlier on in the evening. Is there an Asatru equivalent of Proverbs 31 that explains how women ought to act? The Havamal gives a lot of advice to men, along with general advice for all people, but it's limited for women in specific. Cliff, what say you?
I don't know if there probably are, but I can't think off the top of my head of specific verses or chapters from an Edda or saga that would be equivalent to that psalm. But I think that the idea of the noble lady of Fru or Frau is there throughout all of it. That if you read them as a whole, there's a concept of noble ladyship, if you will, that is there, like I said, throughout. The fact that that the women were the frith weavers, that there should be an element of self-reliance to them, that the women in the sagas are generally courageous, and that they have a very, very strong sense of honor, in particular when it comes to their families. I think those are things that that are important to womanhood in Asatru. Although, this is one where I wish Githia Katie were here. She would probably have some interesting things to add to the conversation.
Yeah. So again, some of this comes from the difference in Asatru to Christianity or to Judaism with Proverbs there. And this is not a better or worse, it just is. It is very handy to have things like Proverbs. Proverbs is cool. When I was a Christian, I think Proverbs was one of the coolest books of the Bible because it does lay out like useful stuff. In a way, it's similar to the Havamal because it's, again, a book of like, here's these little chunks of these little nuggets of applicable wisdom to different circumstances. But that's irregular in the lore that we have. And it would be awesome if our ancestors gave us more material like that, or if, perhaps over time we produced more material like that. What we do have, so much more of our faith isn't a sit down and read faith. It was a taught faith. The written language came very late to our ancestors, specifically to the Norsemen who wrote down our lore. So a lot of our religion was taught verbally. It was an oral tradition that was disseminated amongst the people, spoken in the courts of kings and jarls, and shared generationally by the Gothar. The best place for modern people to look for written examples of expectation of Asatru ladies is, and I saw over in the chat that Witan Facet mentioned Beowulf, and Queen Wealthio, she embodied a lot of that and is an exemplar of female behavior. But the best work on that I've seen is The Lady with the Mead Cup. That is a very good book. I would encourage everyone to read that. It leans heavily on Beowulf along with a couple of other examples. But if you read our sagas and you read our lore, you pick up on themes of things that are thought good for our women and noble, and things worthy of emulation, and things that were negative. It defines femininity in a very the Ostav and Merkstav fashion. They're a very light side, the best of what women can do, and then the worst of what treacherous or evil women can do. And you mentioned the Havamal. It cautions men against bad workings of women a lot. And I think that's valid caution for men to heed. But our Lord talks a lot about the virtues of a noble woman and their bearing and how they ought to be, and ways that they strengthen and reinforce custom, reinforce admonishing and urging men to right action, urging men to do their duty and not shrink from their duty. And I think those things are in many places in our lore. You find snippets of them in the sagas often. Very particularly, you find them in the story of Beowulf. And also one of our heroes, one of our two, I believe, heroines, Queen Sigrid, she exemplifies a woman's dignity and stalwartness for the faith and for doing the right thing. And I think her story is informative onto virtues of womanhood within Asatru. There he is.
Fun fact, Queen Sigurdur was in the running for consideration for Freyshof Hof Hero. But I went in the direction I did to not stack too many feminine shrines into the dais. That is actually one of the things that edged her out, because we were going to be specifically including the shrine to Freya and to Gertha. So
I notice a heresy in the chat. It is a half joking one, but I really want to. There's somebody saying they prefer the animated version of Beowulf. Don't do that. It misses the point and the meat of the actual story, and it infuses a bunch of pieces to the story that aren't there. It really does fundamentally change the story, and I think it's very important to read and be familiar with the actual text. Um, so yeah, I would strongly advise against the animated Beowulf, as it really changes the meaning of the story. And kind of to go on that, Cliff, do you have a best translation or a preferred translation of Beowulf?
I really don't, to be honest. I don't remember which translation it was that I first read when it was assigned to me in high school. Since then, I've read a few others, and I don't have a favorite. And I'm not familiar at all with the animated Beowulf, so I guess good on me if it's.
Yeah, good.
I don't know. Is that a Netflix thing?
They take a lot of liberties with the story and make it about stuff it's not about. They, make it about misdeeds of Beowulf coming back to haunt him, and they add a whole sexual element that's not there, and they use the original story as a very loose backdrop to tell an entirely different morality tale that's not the story.
I mean, there are a lot of different Beowulf movies and a lot of reinterpretations of Beowulf out there, some better than others, but almost all of them fall short and don't include the whole story. They tend to focus on the first half almost always. It's always about Beowulf and Grendel, which is the name of one of those movies that's actually okay, but it doesn't really, it still misses the point of a lot of it, I think.
Yeah, so the Seamus Heaney version is the one I'm most familiar with, but I don't have any big position on that being, a better or worse translation than others. That's the one I'm probably most familiar with, but any actual attempt at a real translation, I think is probably going to get you close, but it's the best I have on a translation recommendation.
Yeah, that's one of the newer ones that I've read. But there's, the thing is with Beowulf, there's a lot of translations too. So
if you're gonna watch a movie and get far afield, get the Christopher Lambert version. That's like sci-fi future craziness.
Is that the one where he falls to the earth in a Mjolnir-shaped spaceship?
Man, I don't. That's probably a different one. I haven't seen that in a long time. Yeah, I haven't seen that in quite a while, and it's not good. If I may ask, what is the relationship between the AFA and Ravenfolk United? I saw Ron McVan with them. So Ravenfolk United is the result of a skinhead coup attempt by traitorous people within the AFA. They had intended to take over the AFA and do AFA stuff, but skinhead style. And it was unsuccessful. So they broke off and tried to take as many members as they could with them through lies and treachery. And probably, a lot of well-meaning people who were tricked in that. I don't know the ratio there, but they are absolutely enemies of the Asatru Folk Assembly and antithetical to who we are as people. I say that their leadership, again, there's probably well-meaning members that don't know any better, and I understand that. So Ron McVan is an honorary AFA member. I think that he is, an elderly gentleman at this point who has been out of, active public participation in Asatru for a pretty long time. And I think he's probably very happy to, say hi and be in a picture with whoever wants to come by and, say hi to him. I think he's very easy to use as a propaganda football to look, here's us with a picture with Ron. He clearly supports what we're doing. I think he's a well-meaning older man that's just not really paying attention to a lot of how Asatru has developed over the last you know, 30 years. I think he's just happy to have fellowship with people who come and extend a hand of friendship and want to do stuff with him. And I think, you know, I would not ever want to try to take advantage of that to, he's our guy. He says you suck because he's in a picture with us. I don't want to do that. I can't really claim their intentions on it, but I worry that gets done with him sometimes. Cliff, do you have anything to add on that?
A lot of that leadership that you mentioned were oath folk builders of the Asatru Folk Assembly, were ordained clergy of the Asatru Folk Assembly, or had already failed in those capacities. So, frankly, for me, Craven Folk United is a collection of failed leaders. They either had failed already and then latched on to this as a way to lift themselves up in a way that they were not able to be successful for real, or who straight up, while currently in an oath hold to our Allsherjargoði and the Asatru Folk Assembly, we're treacherous. We're straight up traitors. There's no other way to say it. I don't like to throw around the term oathbreaker, but that's what happened in the most visceral way. It wasn't just failing in oaths. It was outright betrayal of oaths. And there's a place in Needhog's belly for some of them.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and they'll tell you a very different story, but it was done in such an artificial and treacherous way. It was absolutely a coup attempt that they had planned for some time. And it, hit a lot of us like a ton of bricks. Certainly me personally, it was, just such a shady thing to do. But I think there was a culture clash in the AFA for some time. I had tried very hard to evolve the practice of Asatru in a noble way, in an upstanding and a pious way. And there was a lot of resistance specifically from the skinhead community who wanted to, and I'm trying to be fair, because the people who ask the question have a legitimate thing, and it'd be easy just to say mean things about people who I really dislike. But I think there was a thing like people didn't want to dress nicely. They thought the AFA was getting too churchy, and they wanted to, and I don't think that I'm being incorrect in this, they wanted to basically have, a skinhead kegger that was, I guess, Viking themed. And I think a lot of them were torn between two worlds. Like, they wanted to do this and do this right, and they saw the success the AFA was having, and they wanted to be a part of that success. But they were very, very used to and had come up in this skinhead culture that was their comfort zone. And I think there was a constant battle between them becoming more and ennobling themselves, or them sinking back into what was comfortable. And they ultimately chose to sink back into what was comfortable, but try to emulate or make their own version of what was successful. And you can't really have the one without the other, and I don't think it's worked out very well. But yeah, it's sad, but unfortunately it did help for us to evolve without the impediment of people that were stuck in a churlish and degenerate state of being that they were unable or unwilling to pull up from and try to be better than.
There's a certain irony in the worldview that they were claiming to espouse and what they actually wanted to. What you had was people who at least claimed National Socialism, but were demanding a vote in things. You had the way that they set up their organization after the fact is sort of this like college of co-equals. It, to me, strikes as like you haven't read the source materials for what you're claiming to, for the philosophy that you're claiming. Whether that philosophy is right or wrong is immaterial. They clearly haven't read it and don't understand it. There's just no recognition or respect for the Führer principle and what they were doing there. And also, you know, like Allsherjargoði Matt referred to it, it may seem easy for us to just badmouth, you know, people who, you know, don't have a box on the screen here to defend themselves, but just some anecdotal things that happened over that midsummer weekend. They canceled. They managed to get canceled 2 different venues for events that the AFA was going to be having in upcoming months. They canceled a bunch of hotel reservations to the midsummer at Odenshof that was happening concurrent to their attempt to do this. You know, and they had a backup camp ready to go, reserved for all the people that they were going to try to take with them that they ended up going to. So that all of that is premeditation. This isn't just that there was some I'm inspired by virtue and I have to stand up to Matt the Tyrant in the moment thing going on. There was pre-planning of this treachery.
They had a flag and shirts and like
merchandise was ready to go the same day. Yeah, it was, you know, it was very much a premeditated thing that they were either going to wrest control of the Asatru Folk Assembly from Allsherjargoði Matt Flavel, or they had a backup plan ready to go. And Craven Folk United is the result of that. And if you look at what they have, it very much is this sort of like college of co-equal self-appointed Gothies. There's really no standard for anything. And, you know, I'm sure that Matt and I are going to get flamed by them for saying this stuff in, you know, in an open forum like this, but I don't think either one of us really cares.
No. Nope. But that is, you know, trying to answer your question. That's I think the best we've got on that. But so I guess, you know, if we got more questions, we'll answer them. We don't as of yet, but with the time that we have, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, what's next. Something that's really important to me is to, you know, continue the progress of things. Victory never sleeps. We don't want to rest on our laurels. We accomplished Freyshof. Cool. Now what's next? So what's next in the lineup of AFA, I guess, campaigns or efforts or things that we're working towards is going to be Tiershof. One of the cool things about each Hof that we get is we learn things each time. We learn and develop, you know, a system of how this works, what works well, what we would do differently, what that looks like. And I think we saw that at Freyshof a lot. You know, they were doing a food pantry before dedication, which was awesome for 2 months. So they're already on, you know, a certain amount of good footing with the community. There's, you know, how this works, what we do, how we set it up, how we do a dedication, how we do all those things, which is awesome. All of that will serve us well as we do progressively more Hofs. So Tiershof is going to be our 6th Hof, and that Hof will be on the Sigerheim property in Jackson County, Tennessee. It will be a really unique experience for us because for the first time, instead of purchasing an existent property and repurposing it, this will be built from the ground up as a Hof to Lord Tyr. And that's a very, very special and very weighty opportunity to do something very intentional and to do something very ambitious. So we got a number of plans in the works. I'm working with people now to try to find folks that have the necessary skills and professional abilities to help make the vision into something that's real and that's tangible. Couple of rando things that I wanted to say about it. It would be, we're at a point with AFA membership to where we have a wide array of skill sets amongst our members, both in terms of, hobby skill sets, but also in terms of people who are professionally in a number of trades that are very relevant to what we're trying to do. So one thing to know about Tiershof is at that complex, there will be Tiershof, and there will also be the AFA's Great Hall. Now, Tiershof is by itself going to be the worship space for Lord Tyr. So it's not going to have the same facilities as far as dining and cooking and bathrooms and showers and multi-purpose area and whatever else. That's coming when the hall is built. So the Hof is itself going to just be the worship space for Tyr, which has its advantages, but it also has some rethinking on how we're doing things. Other thing to be said about it, hopefully, and this is my plan, and I'll keep you guys informed as plans develop, I would like for AFA members to be able to put in and do as much of the construction as we can. Now, I'm not that guy. I don't have much construction skills. I'm happy to help and to do what I can, but I'm relying on finding our membership who have the relevant skills and getting them engaged in making this happen. But I also want backup plans in place to where we can engage outside professionals to do things, whatever degree of things that we might need assistance or we might need done for us that way. So planning very much with that in mind. Again, as we get closer, there's going to be more of the vision that I want to articulate about it. But one thing I did want to mention, and this is, as good a time as any, is I want to talk a little bit about the rune for Tiershof, which is Kinaz or Kaun. And it's interesting because it always has like two possible meanings when you want to read about it. The one that people tend to gravitate towards, and I did too for the most of my time being an Asatru, is the torch. But there's like one attested reference to it being a torch in the rune poem. Linguistically and, traditionally, the most prevalent meaning of it is like a festering, ulcerated wound, like a burning, ulcered wound. And that always seemed kind of gross. And the torch seemed way cooler and more inspirational. Now, the meaning of inspiration is the same, but one thing that has been revealed to me or I've come to understand is the idea of Kinaz as literally a burning fire within that ulcerates, a burning inferno of inspiration that has to be expressed, that has to be acted upon, or else it will literally burn from the inside out and ulcerate. The literal fire in the belly to accomplish, to do, to manifest. I think that's really important. And it's something that I realized profoundly that's the most visceral way that our gods speak to me and bless me with their inspiration is with these, you know, burning needs to do certain things in certain ways, or to express certain things, or to accomplish certain things. That drive towards accomplishment and towards victory, and the vision of what that victory looks like, is something that I truly believe is an inspirational gift and directive from the Aesir that I'm very grateful for. And it's special to me in this process leading up to the construction and dedication of Tiershof. So, got some ideas that I think are very important for it that I'm going to put forth in the coming, months, I suppose. That's another thing about Tiershof that I think people should gear up for. I think that the payoff of Freyshof is going to come faster than other people realize, which also means that the groundbreaking of Tiershof is also going to come faster than some folks might expect. So I'm working with folks now. There are plans to put in place to make happen. And as that takes shape, I'll tell you guys a little bit more. There's going to be an article in the upcoming Runestone that I apologize, guys, coming out a little bit late this month because the folks behind it were taking time to be at the dedication during normally when it's published. So it's running a little bit late this month, but that will be getting out to you in the next couple of days. And that'll have a little bit more information about where we're at. Our producer Nick also produces that Runestone, and he is currently diseased. So, but work's getting put in. We're going to make that happen. But I just want to share that with you right now. Have a minute. Okay, so a question did come up. It's a rather open-ended question, but I'm curious about Haminya. Cliff, you have thoughts about Haminya?
Sure. So for anyone who's not familiar with Haminya, it's part of our soul. It is the part of our soul that is our luck, or the personification of luck as a sort of guardian spirit. We can inherit Haminya. We can share Haminya. And I think that especially in the Asatru Folk Assembly, we do share a group Haminya as far as the luck that we are building up. It's sort of partially inherited, because where you come from and what your ancestors have done before, that is transferred to you. But also, it's something that you can build up. It's something that you can fortify, and it's something that you can just inexplicably be blessed with too. And that's perhaps the inherited part. That part is harder to understand in some cases. I think there may, maybe situations where you just don't understand why somebody seems to have such good luck. And it's probably something that their ancestors have done for them, if it doesn't appear like there's anything in their life that makes that make sense. But it is also, it is very much something that you can intentionally build up through right action, through devotion to the Aesir, through physical fitness and mental fitness. You can increase your chances of being successful in any scenario by simply being better prepared. It's the person who is on a boat that sinks. Some people might say that the person who's able to swim back to shore was luckier, but they weren't lucky by accident. They were lucky because they were a better swimmer. So that's my understanding of Haminya. It is it's something to be careful with. I think that our law speaker has emphasized this a number of times. We need to be careful about casually sharing our luck with others, our Haminya with others. And in our modern culture, there's definitely sort of this casualness about, saying things like good luck or, oh, that's my lucky day. And those sort of things are difficult to train out of our daily speech. Much like saying weird in an impious way is difficult to train out of your speech, or just trying to teach yourself to not cuss. If you happen to be a cusser, you have to really pay attention to your words. But I think words are really important. They can make things manifest in the world. Deeds can make things more manifest, but words do matter. And especially when talking about something magical or spiritual like Hamenya, you don't want to be casual with it.
Yeah, so in a specifically in our modern context, Hamenya differs from luck in the sense that it's a shared thing. So when I welcome people to the Asatru Folk Assembly, I mention that they are joining in the AFA's Hamenya. Their luck is added to our luck, and ideally the one is strengthened by the other, and vice versa. Cliff mentioned that your Hamenya is shared by your family, and I think in the most common usage, there is a familial luck that you are a custodian or an inheritor of, that you pass on to future generations, or that you share with them, in the sense of, you, your wife, your parents, your children, perhaps your grandparents, if they're living. You guys all have a certain amount of shared responsibility for that luck. And then it goes, into the future, hopefully stronger than when you got it. But luck in our common parlance in 2025 is thought of as like a random happenstance. But it's not. It's a built up. I guess one of the better ways that I've thought of to express it is a built up momentum towards something. If you have built poor luck and you have a poor Hamenya, then you are nudged towards bad fortune or towards failure, all things being equal. If you have a good Hamenya, you are nudged or set on a momentum towards success with the endeavors you engage in, and more likely to find success in your endeavors. If you have a powerful Hamenya, it's like a force. There's something about you in the role that you're on that, it can seem unstoppable, or it can seem, a foregone conclusion that you're going to accomplish all you set out to do. And we see stories about that in our lore and in history all the time, of people that seem to have an overwhelming power about them that shifts the course of events. And this was thought to be a virtue by our ancestors, and certainly it is. There are certain people that victory just follows because their Hamenya their luck is overwhelming and is mighty. And when that's shared by a group of people, that's Hamenya. And you're a steward of it. Your Hamenya is built through a consistent or an inherited amount of right action, and doing the right things, and building a momentum through victory and through accomplishment and through reputation and through consistency of character and consistency of deed and through effort. And if you do a lot of those things, you will find that you have a momentum towards success. And if you inherit poor Hamenya, if your parents are not good people, if you come from a line of people that have not been honorable or not been successful or been losers, then it's like you're fighting a headwind to accomplish things in life. But take heart on that, because if you are, you have a particular opportunity for heroism and success. It is truly heroic to be able to overcome poor Hymenia, to take yourself from the negative and end up creating something in the positive. That is a heroic effort. And that's why that's one reason why viscerally we see such a nobility in the underdog story, is because they're fighting a headwind and still able to overcome. And that's a special thing, and it's a special opportunity. So we've got a new Hof. They've got mottos. Yeah. Does Freyshof have a motto to work by? Certainly it does. Cliff, what is Freyshof's motto and why?
So Freyshof motto is "By our good names," and that is derived from the kindred oath of the Keystone True Folk. I followed the lead of Thor's Hof, where the Thor's Hof motto comes from the Iron Guard kindred that preceded that Hof, and in a lot of ways was the seed for that Hof. And in the Keystone True Folk oath, the wording isn't exactly the same, but after we've said the various things in the oath, we would state, "By my own good name, by my family name, by my gods, and by my descendants, I so swear it." And so by our good names is a collectivization of that concept. And that is that for those of us who are involved in running and helping to dedicate Freyshof, and for everyone who will attend there, we are practicing Asatru openly, and we are willing to stake our names on it, that our reputations are the reputations of Freyshof, and that our reputations will reflect rather on Freyr. And I think that's important. We talk about practicing Asatru openly. We talk about and some of this stuff we don't talk about as much anymore, but maybe we should, wearing your hammer on the outside of your shirt, and, being Asatru all the time, not just on the third Saturday of a month when you're at bloat at a Hof. And that's what that motto is meant to encompass, that we're willing to stake our own reputations on it.
Yeah, I think that's as if the others aren't, but I think that's a really, poignant or important one. And I think it goes, it's really weird that it pairs with our last question so well. Final question of the night. Is there an AFA community in Texas? No, but there are many AFA members in Texas. So Texas is a conundrum. We have several members in Texas. It's a big state, but we have, and I'm going to pull up the member map here. We have we have groups, we have members spread out through a lot of the state. The very far, like El Paso, West Texas, relatively few. Most of our Texas members would be in Eastern Texas, in the eastern half of the state. Some are in the middle, but like if you drew a line down the center, most of them are in the eastern half of the state. We've got a relatively good-sized group it's not more than relative. We've got a good-sized group in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've got another little grouping in the Austin area, and we've got another grouping around, within driving distance of the Houston area. We would love to have a healthy community in Texas, and that would be wonderful to have. We've wanted that for a while. Texas is a tough nut to crack, but I think there's a lot of potential there. It's where our founder's from, and I think a lot can be built and grown there. But what we need is stable membership, and we need leadership in Texas. We need a folk builder to volunteer to build something in Texas and to host things consistently, to invite people to show up at the things they host, and to put in the momentum to build a community there over time. And I'm very confident that if we had somebody who was willing to do those things and work with the rest of AFA leadership to make Texas shine, there is a lot of potential to be had there. We have had flaky people in Texas, unfortunately. One of our ex-clergymen that was, that has since become part of the Ravens Folk United ilk, was originally in Texas for a minute. He was committed and on board and going to do big things, and then he fell by the wayside, unfortunately. But there was a time when we were in contemplation for Njordshof where, I want to say near Galveston, we were very much considering a Hof in Texas. We were considering Njordshof might have been on the Gulf Coast in Texas there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. If you are somebody in Texas that wants to find AFA community, if you're willing to do some things, that's something we've very much got our eye on and would love to see some stuff happen. Can I give you out? I love you. I'll see you in the morning.
You said to come.
Okay.
You said to come in my room.
Okay. With that, we have one more question, but it's easy because it's what we just said. We got, what does it say on the Freyshof flag? It says the motto that we just mentioned, by our good names. Ta-da! Also, teaser. Nick, if you haven't thrown it up already, or even if you have, can you put up the logo for Tearshof? There you go. So we're working on Tearshof. That's coming. We've ambitiously said it's coming in the 2020s, and I think over the next 4 years we can probably make that happen. But yeah, we're very excited to see that happening, and we are on to that. And like I said, there'll be a little bit more about that in the upcoming edition of the Runestone. Cliff's fiddling with his lapel pin, so I don't know if he's doing a show and tell for us or if he's just
will be. Yep.
Okay.
So before we go for the night, I wanted to just tease out there that Freyshof merchandise, including this mighty fine pin, will be available on our store most likely tomorrow night. I need to go back to Freyshof after the dedication to do a proper inventory. That's where our web store is housed currently. And before I put the things up onto the website, I wanted to make sure I had the inventory correct because I don't want to tease people and sell them stuff that maybe was sold out at the dedication. So look for an announcement tomorrow about new stuff on the store. There will be some books. There will be the Freyshof flag, Freyshof shirts, and the Freyshof pin that I just showed you, and more to come after that. But I needed the inventory count to be correct before I could put that up because I don't want to have to communicate with you about refunds or delays or anything like that.
Excellent. So, because Cliff put it out there, this is the guy right here. If you are ordering stuff from the store, if you have store questions, store complaints, store opinions and thoughts, this is the man to send them to. If you send them to me, it just means I'm going to send him a message or forward them to him or make grumpy faces or whatever might be the occasion. But no, we are appreciative that Witan Erickson is taking on the responsibility for doing our store stuff. That is it's cool when we have nice things, but it's also a little bit more of a challenge than I think some folks realize. So it's nice to have him stepping in with his very capable hands to help us manage that. Another question, again, it's easy. So we will entertain it this evening. No, I apologize. We're happy to answer any of y'all's questions. Are there currently any members in New Zealand? There are not. We used to have a we used to have a good group of folks in New Zealand, and we had a kindred in New Zealand. Political forces in New Zealand have made it a little bit more difficult for some of our folks to feel comfortable being openly AFA members in Asatru in New Zealand. I hope that we have people that have the courage and fortitude to want to take up that opportunity again. We would love to have more presence in that very beautiful country. I've had the privilege of visiting there once, and it's a very beautiful place, and many amazing people there that I'm sure would love to come home to their gods. So we'd love to see that grow, but there's not members there currently. We do have a folk builder, Chris McDonald, who is in Australia. No, it's not the same country. I'm just saying it's much closer than our United States folk builders. And I'm sure he would love to help grow our membership there. If you or any people that you know are so inclined, we'd love to see that happen. And we've had members there before, and we'd love to have them there again. Cliff, any final words for folks this evening?
Well, I see there's another question. Will you have a Yule log? I don't know if that's directed to you or to me or to Freyshof or
all of the above. Cliff, will you in any of personally, professionally, any of these above, will you have any kind of Yule log in your Yule festivities this year?
So yes, my family, we have a tradition where we keep the bottom portion of the trunk of our previous year's Yule tree, and we use that as our Yule log the following year. We actually wait until the last day of Yule to burn that, to bring in the new year, to sort of complete the cycle of renewal that all represents. And we keep that trunk. Usually I truncate the trunk, to a proper log size. We keep the fat bottom part, not the skinny top part. And we'll keep that in like the china cabinet where we keep our ritual horn and my hallowing hammer and other ritual implements, and it stays there for the year and picks up energies, both good and bad, whatever our year is like, and we turn that over every Yuletide. Whether or not there will be one at Freyshof, we're not sure yet. I was talking to Githia Katie about this today, about whether or not we are going to have a live tree at Freyshof, because it would be there for one day. So we're thinking in the practical terms there. I'd like to. There's part of me that wants to implement this sort of, continuity cycle with the old year and the new year, to have that going with the Yule tree and the Yule log both being present together for Yuletide, but then turning over year after year. It would have to be adapted. We're not going to be there for all 12 days of Yule at Freyshof. Of course, starting a new one, we would not have a log. We would just have the tree, or perhaps in a more practical way, we will be putting up an artificial tree to use in a more practical way.
It's an idea, and it depends where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a cool idea to just go cut one down and get it. It's a little bit different if you got to go buy one and transport a bunch of stuff. People who are in a more rural place, or a place where it's not a difficulty to go out in the woods and cut one down and get it. It's a cool thing to do if you can. The tree, that is, the Yule log is it's what you're able to do. But one of the things that's a sincere hope of mine as we get more and more hofs, it is a twofold thing. And you guys have tricked us, because as we decide last question of the night, then all of a sudden you guys ask questions. No, I appreciate that. We're happy to answer all you guys' questions. It's neat if you can do it. But what I was going to say is, as we get more and more hofs, they are getting closer and closer to our membership. But I would also like for everyone to consider moving closer to one of our hofs. Um, I realize that that is a big ask. When we had one Hof at Odenshof, I tried to move myself and my trying to think if she was my fiance at the time, just my girlfriend.
Your lady.
My lady across the country to be closer to Odenshof. That was really important to us. I think it's really good if you can to get within the town that a Hof is in or within the county. And I'm gonna move again. I love where I live, but I'm gonna move again so that I can be in the same county and be able to do the Tiershof there. So I get that it's hard. I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. Move closer to one of our Hofs. The closer we have, if we have people in the same town or the same county as our Hofs, then we can do stuff there weekly. We can do stuff to where we're there every day of the 12 days of Yule. We can do those kind of things if we live close. When people have to drive, hours to get to the Hofs, then we do the best we can and we do stuff once a month. But the closer we get in proximity, the more we can really spend time and occupy and do things at the Hofs in the way that we'd like to. And so I would encourage everyone to build up the local community around the Hofs and be able to do things there. Being able to do that's going to really elevate our practice.
Cliff, this at the dedication, but there are multiple homes for sale right in the neighborhood of Freyshof. We don't know about the building right next door, but it looks like if you made an offer, you probably would get a good deal on it. There's a building there that needs some love, but there are also several homes for sale on the same road and the road right around the corner that have their for sale signs out right now. So check it out if you're interested in moving near Freyshof. Katie and I are only an hour and 15 minutes away. We really like where we are, so we're probably not going to do that ourselves right yet, although it is tempting. But we are an hour and 15 minutes for us. We're willing to do that every weekend, obviously. So, that's the sort of thing.
Such a good opportunity. It's such a good opportunity. I know it sounds like a big deal. I think people will be happy if they do it. We've got some people out here that are moving closer and closer. We've got one AFA family that lives in Brownsville with Odenshof, and we're getting more that want to do that. Even if it's just a handful, there's stuff that can happen if you do it.
I did it.
So that is true, and that is worthy of recognition and celebration. It has taken longer to get us moved to Sigerheim than we had planned. It seems like such an easy thing to do for, maybe it is for younger people or people who are a little bit less embedded where they're at or don't have a family or whatever. It has taken me and my family longer than I had planned. We're trying the best we can, and I would love to see us out there, in the first couple of months of next year. We're excited. We're making the effort that we can. But when I said, hey, guys, I want our people to move to Jackson County, Tennessee, so we can make this thing happen, I think that was about 3 years ago. Our producer, Nick, he jumped on it immediately. Sold the place he had, he packed up, and he moved out there. And that he is the first pioneer at Sigerheim. And something really beautiful and amazing is going to be built around that pioneering effort. And he's going to go down in history celebrated for that. That's an important thing, and we really appreciate it. So people do it. People do it. People are fixing to do it. You should do it. Make it happen. But here's the thing. You're going to have more and more options the more Hofs we get. And when people ask, because people have asked us about Sigerheim, like, is it going to be a brain drain? Like, you're going to do this thing and you're getting everybody excited about the Capitol. Will all the Gothar or all the luminaries move there? Realistically, no. Be cool, but realistically, different people for a variety of different reasons are more or less mobile. But the answer really is both. We're going to try to put Hofs closer to all of you, And at the same time, we want all of you to move closer and closer to the hofs we have. And if we're doing those things together, it's going to make a certain amount of equilibrium to where our hofs and our people are getting closer and closer together, and we can really accelerate this that we're doing. So I would encourage you guys all to do that. Cliff, are there going to be more clothing items in the store? Hats, shirts, hoodies, etc.
Short answer is yes. Longer answer is it depends. So one of the things that I really want to avoid with the store is ever having items go out of stock again. Easier said than done, but that's my intention, something short of a promise. But what I want to have is some stability. So I want to make sure that we always have the pins for each of the hofs in the AFA, and that we always have the flags available. I want to make sure that we always have the books by Founder McNallen available. And I want to have at least one shirt for the Asatru Folk Assembly and each of the hofs available. Those are my priorities for the rest of this year. Other things like hoodies and hats, maybe, if we're successful in the next year with just getting baseline stuff introduced in a stable and a cost-effective way. It has to at least break even.
Has to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
More than that, it has to make sense.
There you go. That's funny.
Ideally, it has to make dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So here's if you are listening to this and you produce those kind of clothing items, hats, shirts, hoodies, etc., contact us, let us know. We'd love to do business with our people. Even if you're just watching the show casually, we'd love to do business with fans of the show over, Chinese or whatever else the situation might call for. But the money's got to line up, and we've gotten to a point where production of these kind of things for, small batch stuff is prohibitively expensive. Those costs have really risen. So if we have anybody in-house that does, t-shirt, screen printing, or other things that way, we'd be happy to do business with some of our people if we can make the money work out right. We're not looking to get rich off of these things, but we also can't really take a loss on them. So, and I say that we'd be happy to get rich off of them. That's the thing, but that's not our primary mission. So if you're somebody who does that kind of stuff, we'd be happy to work with you if it works out right. So please do keep that in mind.
Sadly, y'all are probably going to see a little bit of an increase in the shipping prices. That's been something we've been working on. The prices are too low right now, sadly.
Cliff and I both are not big spenders on stuff. It hurts us to charge lots of shipping. We don't want to do that. The postal industry, though, has done that, and Amazon's figured out a way around it because they've got their own fleet of shipping planes and vehicles and stuff. In case you haven't noticed, we do not have the infrastructure that Amazon has. So, yeah, shipping is grossly expensive. We're always looking for the best way to do it, but the best way we can find to do it is offensive in how much it costs, doing the best we can, but shipping's gross, and I don't know how to fix it. That's kind of a USPS thing and not something that we really have access to. And I say that as soon as I say it, well, have you guys looked into UPS or FedEx? We have. We can't find a better option right now. If you know the secret to unlocking the shipping code, let Cliff know. We're happy to think about it, but we're doing the best we can to figure it out. Shipping costs, I promise it's not shipping and handling. We're not like making money off the shipping. It's just shipping.
Yeah. I mean, for reference, not including the envelope, I can't ship this pin for less than $8, which is ridiculous. But yeah, that's a cost we have to cover. So I don't want to scare anyone. Just know that we're not trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah, we're doing the best we can. And so seriously, crowdsourcing a lot of this stuff. And so you guys know, I'll be crowdsourcing things as far as Tiershof construction goes. we're trying to figure out ways to utilize the reach that we have in our membership to help get these things accomplished. If you know the secret to small business shipping in something that's reasonable, please share that knowledge with us. We very much appreciate it. If you've got the skills to make shirts and hats and merchandise, love to do business with you. Let us know. We'll, if we can make it work, we'd be happy to. But that is where that's at. The other question, the final one that's in the current queue, are creatures like the Yule Cat in some way related to Asatru? Cliff, do you have anything to share about the Yule Cat's relationship to Asatru, if any?
So first, the Yule Cat is just awesome. The Yule Cat, for anyone who is not familiar, is this giant monster cat from Icelandic lore that will eat children who haven't prepared their winter clothes before Christmas Eve. I don't know if it's related to Asatru specifically. It originated in the Middle Ages or earlier, among farmers. So where exactly and when exactly it comes from is unclear. I looked a little bit of stuff up about it when I saw the question pop up because I was excited to talk about it. But it was first written down in the 19th century, and it's a much older piece of folklore. It's sort of like the Grimm's fairy tale stuff. They wrote that stuff down hundreds, maybe thousands of years after those stories were first told. Is it specifically Asatru? I guess no, but I tend to take the position, it's the position I take, that all of these folklore kind of things, the Grimm's fairy tales, the different Scandinavian folklores, English folklores, for example, the white stag in Anglo-Saxon kingship, that doesn't occur anywhere in the Asatru lore, but we took that from the English lore because of the association of Yngvi Freyr with kingship, and the heart antler, and kind of synthesize those into the Freyshof flag. But I take the position that all of those folklores are true, in that they are part of our people's understanding of the world around them, going back to prehistory. So, the Yule Cat is just another form of like the boogeyman, or the trolls in Norway. There's like troll hags that will like steal your baby and switch it with their baby because they find their troll baby really annoying, and then the mother has to do a specific thing. Like basically the mom has to beat up the troll baby until it cries, so that the troll mom feels bad and comes back and switches the babies back, justifying some sorts of social behaviors, I guess. But I think that a lot of these folklores have roots, if not in our ancestors' religious beliefs, but in their worldview. Sleeping Beauty is connected to Brunhild, and Snow White is basically the same story, just told a different way. So there's a lot of this stuff all in our collective memory. And the Yule Cat that comes and eats the kids who haven't knitted their sweaters yet, haven't processed the wool yet, it's a really fun one, because it's this giant monster cat that's going to eat you. And I guess in Iceland, they didn't have a whole lot of predatory animals that were going to come get you. I don't know if they had wolves there or not. I don't think there weren't really many things out there. So a big cat was like as scary as it got.
Birds.
What's that?
We've got birds.
Birds, sure. Well, there used to be
birds.
There used to be very large birds that could eat people. So, but yeah, I mean, related. The question was in some way related to Asatru. So my answer is a firm yes on that, because it's part of our folks' collective memory. but is it attested in the lore or something like that? Not that I know of.
A bunch of those stuff are European white people stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the thing. The fun Christmas stuff is European white people stuff.
Yeah.
It's not so much that all of it is firmly an Asatru religious practice. A lot of it's just fun folk customs around the season. Sometimes they're serious and reinforce, hey, you need to have your stuff in order by a certain time in winter or else you're going to freeze to death. Get your stuff done or we're going to sick the cat on you. Like there's things, but a lot of them are just fun. But you know what? None of them have to do with a desert manger and, questionable origin child getting born in it. There's very little that's fun and awesome about European Christmas traditions that have anything to do with Judea or the Bible or the Christ child. So yeah, it's not Jesus stuff. I'll say that. It's also our Dutch brethren have chocolatey Pete. And if the kids don't behave well, they may wake up the next day and not have a bike. There's the Krampus tradition and other just fun, like if you don't do stuff right, like Santa's enforcer is always a fun element of, some of the old European Yuletide traditions of cool. You've got a nice, jolly person that, although I'll say fat American Coca-Cola Santa is awesome. European Santa Claus is creepy. I want to find the picture and I have it somewhere. There's a picture of my mom and my uncle, their early childhood years. My uncle was born in 1950. My mom was born in 1948. My grandfather was stationed in Berlin in post-war Reconstruction Germany. German Santa Claus is creepy, and the guy that was officiating as German Santa Claus in their pictures, he's a skinny, creepy, crazy-eyed looking, looks like some kind of a junkie. Sure, he probably wasn't, but he didn't look like he was eating too good. It was creepy. Some of those European Santa pictures are kind of creepy. But yeah, all the fun stuff has very, very little to do with biblical Christianity. It erupts from the imagination and the folk soul of our people and the innovations of our people. And it's one of those things to keep in mind. Religiosity, as it's interpreted in Europe, looks very different. And like one for one, Christianity in Europe looks very different than Coptic Christianity in Egypt, than, Asian Christianity. Again, when we live in a very, very interconnected age like we do now, the diversity is less because you can transmit like how it's supposed to be done very easily. But back before all that, the Christian practice and Christian churches in different parts of the world were very, very different because different races of people approach religion very differently. So much of medieval Christianity isn't biblical or Christian at all. It's the European folk soul expressing religiosity the way it knows how and devoting that religiosity to an unworthy or an inappropriate focal point. But the idea of how you practice religion comes from our soul and our practice, and ultimately from Asatru. So, when people, the AFA just looks like Christianity with the gods instead of Jesus. That's what medieval Christianity is Asatru Jesus instead of the gods. And that's absolutely true. And I think that, undoubtedly some Middle Eastern things came into the development over the course of the millennia, but no, by and large, it's, we're practicing religion. We'll just slap Jesus on it and call it good. That's literally the directive of the Pope when converting the Englishmen was don't deviate from their practice, just devote all of that towards Jesus and not towards their gods. So, when people notice, like, man, you guys look like Christian, you mean we look like other white people that are trying to worship our gods? Yes, we do look like white people practicing religion because we're white people practicing religion. And I think, yeah,
that's why the Christians may have been able to purge the names of the gods from our folks' general practices, but they couldn't get rid of the fairies, the elves, and the trolls, and all the rest of that. That part of it stayed because they weren't directly focused on that. They were, okay, this rite is not to Odin, it's to Jesus, but then all the elves and everything else stuck around.
All right. Well, that is in fact the last question that we had. So, Cliff, it's been a pleasure having you on. Even more so, it has been an absolute pleasure being there for the Hof that you and your wife are the caretakers of, that have turned into a Hof and made such an amazing experience. So thank you very much for that. You guys make Freyr proud.
It's my honor. I'm looking forward to this first year, especially to develop that routine and Freyshof culture. Every Holy Tide we celebrate for the next year will be the first one there. So, we want to do our best to get it right and to establish that and improve it from there. But the baseline is going to be really important, I think.
We are all envious, and if we are not, then we should be. But yeah, we've got amazing things happening. I am blessed to be able to be a part of it. Till next week, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.